It's on. All right. Welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming out. We've got a lot of different communities here. Some of you know Dr. Davidson personally. My name is Dave. I'm his graduate student. I've been working with him for 3 years. It's an honor for me to be able to bring this presentation and give him a little impetus, a little push to actually present it for once. He's given this talk a few times. Hopefully he remembers it all, but great. Dr. Davidson has been a mountaineer for a long time. We've gone up Weaver's Needle just recently. He's had many ascents in the Alaskan ranges, Mount Logan, Fairweather, a couple. I've heard all about these different climbs through talking. It's why I'm in my 3rd year of grad school and still haven't finished.
Yeah!
So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to him and let him take the stage.
Well, thank you all for coming to hear about the event that took place a very long time ago, presented on antique equipment and by an even older antique. The story starts, and it is a little hot. The story starts in the summer of 1968 in the Canadian Rockies, where 2 friends of mine, Ken and Gus, and I were hiking back to our homes for the last time in that season. The weather had been abysmal, so we missed a number of summits. Actually, just consumed all our rations for 2 days, watching it rain. Putting on the Cinnabon without ever seeing about 500 feet to the bottom of the clouds. So thoughts on the trail readily turned toward possible objectives for the upcoming summer, and it was Ken who suggested that we attempt something in Alaska. Upon getting home, that idea began to eat away at me, so that when he turned up at our home in Ohio, we did with a list of 20 possible objectives. I was an easy mark. We studied those with mountain journals, finally came to the conclusion of what we called dust. So we all were involved, and it was decided we would attempt the unclimbed east ridge of Denali. So the early months of 1969 were spent talking to people who had been on nearby ridges. There was a party who attempted the East Ridge 12 years before, in the 50s. They had managed to get on it very low down and were psyched out by what they saw, so never made any additional progress. And we had to enlarge the group. This enterprise was going to take more than 3 people. We tried to get it to 8, but we ended up getting in with 7. So, yeah, by late May, all was in readiness. Let's tonight go north and join the expedition in Alaska and see what lies before us. The ridge we have in mind is this one right here. We're going to find that we can't get on it out here very effectively through the earlier group did. And we're going to be forced to come up a spur ridge here, which kind of blends in, but gets some details later, to join the ridge of this peak 11,920, and then follow all the way along here up to this spot, which is a little over 14,000 feet. And then what you can't see too well is that there's a very big basin. This is the ridge that's near, right here. And between it and the far ridge in the back is a big bowl called Fair Basin that's about 1.5 miles or so wide. And we'll gain the ridge, the far ridge here, and then put Camp 7 or 9 of the last one right up here, and then go to the top and back down in the day and worry about getting done for the people. So we arrived in Anchorage, spent 2 days packing food and cutting coils of fixed rope into lengths, normally rope lengths, about 150 to 60 feet. We packed, transported the entire collection north by rail on the Alaska Railway to Talkeetna, where we occupied the entire baggage handling capacity of the terminal. These 2 old hand carts. That's the entire lot of stuff. Then we fly up the Ruth Glacier, seen here. Now I've got a little closer view of our Spur Ridge going to peak 11,920 right here. This is what we're going to ultimately go out. To land at base camp is around 5,500 feet. And that peak that was just behind there is Mount Huntington. Everybody is very inspired to the ridge. It's very close. It's a little over 12,000 feet high. And the harbor's not very fun, and managed to get out the year before. So let's, at this time, introduce people who are going. Gus Fenner was at that time an MD in Berkeley. He spent his entire career there and is now retired. Ken Jones, at that time, was an engineer working for Boeing. He actually got his degree in Ohio State, where I was at the time. But subsequently, he became a fisherman in Homer, Alaska. And as far as I know, he's still there. Jim Gillen was a grad student in medieval history, and he became a professor and spent his career at UC Irvine. Pete Regan then was a teacher. Ultimately, he followed in his father's footsteps and became an MD. But at the time, he wasn't really sure he wanted to do that. Pretty else. Bob Priest, mechanical engineer, at that time in California. Later got a PhD degree at ASU in railway vehicle dynamics. And he's with us tonight, now retired and working as a consultant. Niels Anderson then was a grad student in architecture at University of Washington. In the next year or two, I forget which one, he and a companion were developed by Whiteout on the Matterhorn. And I went along sort of as chief cook and faculty. But one of the most important people was our bush pilot, Cliff Hudson, who lived in Talkeetna. So now let's look at what we have to do. This is the view down. The base camp is back here behind this little pinnacle called Mount Morrill. And we're going to carry our material out through here. Camp 1 is placed right about there in the glacier. We'll be about here, and Camp 2 will be about this long. So this is the Ruth Glacier. We'll have another view of it in 45 minutes or so. That shows it much more fast than this there. Oh, there's one feature that doesn't want to drop in. Did that earlier. As we travel from behind Mount Morrill here and come around up this way, and looking in this direction, this is what we see. If you look very closely, there are 1, 2, 3, well, I guess there's 1, I have 3 dots. Those are the people of the two-person road. So we're approaching this wall right here and go around the corner to the region where Camp 1 will be located. Some of the crevasses are big, and we have to find a way through all this. Now we're moving a little farther. We're city folks, most of us, so, and remember, even though we break up the load, we didn't take those two large baggage carts and just divide by 7, and each of us take 27 from that whole load. We're carrying, making 4 carries up the glacier. But even at that, people are carrying 80-pound packs. These and Gus sort of had a contest. Very heavy pack. This is just polish. More stuff gets up really fast. Now, we work at night. The idea is that you can have frozen snow, then, and it will be frozen during the day. But unfortunately, the weather in Alaska that year was quite warm. So even at night, it did not feel below freezing. This means even though we put a route in one day and use it, the roads are getting thinner and thinner and thinner. So with 4 carries, it's bound to occur that somebody will go through. If your Gus is going through a roof that we could right in the middle of the trail to do before. You have to stay low. Never trust the trail. This one has a floor. So he's able to get out pretty easily, rescue himself. And then we arrive at the location for Camp 2. Now we need to look at what we have ahead of us. Camp 2 is actually right about there. Our original intent was to go through up this ice fall that's right here, back, in order to gain the ridge trail there. So we're looking down the ridge. And there's another possibility, which is an ice fall in between here. The first one on the right is this one. And as Bob and I believe we're on the road, and on the glacier, we never traveled with 2. So we were either, I think, probably 3 deep that way. But the 2 of us were on a 100-foot serac, fell off to a big crash. And you can see our trail here going out in that direction. None of us were very enthusiastic about the objective dangers. One, which we just had no anticipated overall. We can't protect against it. So we really like business. We looked at the next ice fall as well. Around, that's the one in between these 2. And it didn't look much better. While then just bringing loads up from Camp 1, another party went across this area to this ridge, which we ultimately called Cat. And so we decided to change our procedure, and we would leave most of the extra equipment, things like extra tent, extra pots, things that we could lose if we really need extra sleeping bag. At the old Camp 2 site, a few extra boxes of food, in case we got stuck on the glacier on the descent. But moved everything we're going to take uphill about a mile across to this location. At the foot of this. Now let's see, we need to identify a few landmarks. There's a rock, 1, I guess we go, down here, 2, this is actually the second rock, that's the third one, and there's a little bit of rock up there, the 4th. So, just that in mind, here's the way we get started at the bottom. And we simply go up the snow. Now we don't have to worry about much falling down. Across this direction, one up left in here became a very icy waterfall that we got, and it flattened out a little bit. And here you can see Camp 3. It's now just below this rock right here, the third rock. One party tried going up over the rock, and some of us were carrying loads up to Camp 3 below. And we're exploring, following up the ridge to see what it looked like. Gus shut it down and said, I don't think we want to carry loads over this. Try the side. So we did so. And this is going under rock 3. And the person standing right here, we look back the other way, we get this view. This is what it looks like close up. And the kick stroke, coming all the way down, flipping into it. Turning a little farther, you get out on this snow at this spot, and then go right straight up. You rejoin the ridge beyond this third rock. And we call that traverse along here the shovel traverse. One of the most important pieces of equipment we took on this trip was you will see a good picture of later, a steel shovel, because the aluminum was just don't work. They're actually shoveling ice along here. You have to make a flat platform to walk on. So here you can see what it looks like actually shoveled. The ice is actually somewhat punchy. So you have to actually shovel it out and flat. Okay. Well, we've been quite a few days, and so I'm told by my friends that I was getting disappointed with the progress. We shovel on. Here you get a better picture of the shovel. This is up toward fourth rock. And then past the fourth rock, we come to an area that we call the Serac Traverse. Some of these days, we're only able to put in 3 lengths of pitch run. It takes 12 hours to get that much done. And here you see what's perplexing us. This is sitting right on the ridge. They shovel and traverse around, making route. Some of it's quite picturesque. But I'm still not real happy about the progress. Then comes the next point. And nobody could figure a way to go up over the snow and the ice. So, well, we'll try a traverse. It was really a very steep, long traverse. We actually had a 100-foot fall. It was held. But there we start down here and we move out across this, turning around and looking the other way, looking forward. This will go over to here, and up, I believe, onto this chunk of rock, and then straight up, you can't forward be placed just over the ridge. Now, 2 of us attempted, there we're coming up to Camp 4, after just first getting that route in, hoping to bypass it. So Ken and I started back down the ridge crest, thinking, well, it was difficult to climb and just rappel off of it and go up the rope. And what we found was that the ridge actually was a great crack. So the left side, over here we come up, was solid, but the right one was a large cornice. In fact, I should have said, This traverse is called the haunted traverse because as while we were there, it would creak and groan, and then those noises would be punctuated with loud bangs. We didn't know what they were. My guess is that they were slow degradation of that large cornice on the other side of the ridge. So I had spoken with Boyd Everett, who's on the southeast spur of the side, and he always reported back about this time walking down after the climb, putting his ice axe in the cornice. We were walking a fracture line, and the cornice broke off, and it just went on down. So we, both Tim and I, thought that it would not be at all a good idea if we were shooting in this canyon and one whole side of it just disappeared because we didn't have anything to hang on to. So we simply kept using that slope. The haunted traverse had to keep fixing it up, but we used it. Now getting above the question, please. And we begin to look around a little. Here's the east ridge one here, and then the southeast spur over here. And now you see one of the reasons we like leaders. Here comes an avalanche, gathering steam, maybe fire racket, going down the slope. So we can start avalanches, but we don't have to be on them. Now, here's what we're actually doing. We put in pickets, two places we used ice screws, not very many, a couple places we used rock declines. So this will be pounded all the way into the snow, and a white line, a quarter of 5/8, not 5/16 roll bar rope will be used from one picket to the next. And each climber then carrying loads will be on his own picket, his own anchor. And this is the way we keep them sliding down. It's a canyon device like a Next came something we call the Matterhorn traverse. This was made of, I would say, 50% air and 50% ice. It was terrible stuff. You step on it, it just going down. I was really sure we were going to get into a very solid hole. We had to chop quite a lot. And this was the traverse around it. Here, sort of beginning like the window washer, hanging on the fixed rope is hiding on the corner. But the sun during the daytime, we're still working at night. But in the daytime, the sun comes on and wrecks it. So the next day, the trail, the steps aren't any good. So there's a lot of energy and time spent in this. Fortunately, it isn't very long. Then we get above it and look at what lies ahead. Still not up to the east ridge here, but we're getting there. Some crevasses, an 80-foot ice step. It's not really vertical, but straight up that. And then we finally get a nice 35-degree slope that takes us all the way up to the top of the 11,920. Now we've made the ridge. 19 days. We packed 40 days of food to carry up. And so far, 19 days of home. At least one of these ridge. And we can begin looking around at other parts of the hill and nearby companies. Here's the way camp works. Water is obtained by melting snow.
Trying.
Yeah.
It'll start.
Let's see, we were, so I think that now I believe that we, in addition to melting in a pot, we found that the sun was sufficiently warm that we could use a dark colored tarp to just throw snow on it. And in the daytime, we get several pots full of water. Writing diary, sleeping, drying socks. And the snow is still very sticky in the neighborhood. All right, now let's look at what lies on the East Ridge. So we've got about here is a 200-foot ice stack that we knew was something we had to negotiate from photographs that we've gotten. A colleague had flown here to mountain and taken photographs, so we knew this was here. And then there's this long ice slope. It's actually 1,700 feet vertically, but the incline makes it a half a mile even from the bottom all the way up to the top. And it's steep enough that it fits it the whole way. So here's what the ridge looks like from peak 11,920. Starting out, there are cornices, some of them big, and of course, there's a good picture of the steel shovel. Then here's the ice step. It actually wasn't 200 feet vertical. It was very, very steep at the bottom. Only the top 50 feet was actually 90 degrees. And we sent out our vertical ice beam needles and pins, and they fixed their way up it. And then there's a long plateau after that, going forward. Then they came back to kind of a tail of low. That it wasn't at all clear we would be able to get to the top, or even onward. Here's what they saw. There are alternating cornices. There's a cornice leaning to the left, after which there's a big chunk leaning to the right, after which there's another chunk leaning to the left. And this person is standing actually on the first one, which leans to the right. So there's 4 pieces. And then there's this sunlit slope going up here. Then you have to go out on this overhanging snow, and then straight on up into a find it. So we sent out a party that didn't know any better. And let's see if I can do which one of these. There we go on the alternating cornices through here. This is actually looking down, so you see the trail. That's actually on the cornice. Now here, up, long, and then we simply cut our way through these. Now the junctions are interesting places, because it was kind of open on each side. You saw that person continually stepping across. So now we're at the sunlit slope. And the picture on the right shows someone going like this. And the next one comes right out from here, and you can see the trail goes right out of there. It says Camp 6. So we actually managed to. And here we are at Camp 6, about 12,700 feet. And we can look around and really see the countryside somehow. On the left over here is the Davidson Glacier. Down here's the roof gorge we come up, clouds are beginning to move in. This is the ridge that we've fallen all the way up. That's the ridge. And then we go on ahead, up the half-mile slope. There you see the trail going, and there are two little people here that become bigger with the telephoto lens. And each of those little divots into the snow is 150, for each pair, 150 feet apart. We're using that fixed rope, and this party comes back down. He said, well, sorry, we didn't get the top. Well, we had out a fixed rope. And at this point, so where are we going to get to the 2.5 lengths of fixed rope? Well, we can go through some bridges, go down below and pull up. We'll have to replace it when we get down. And this is when we found we had a souvenir collector on this. Because out of a pack came a piece of fixed rope. Well, you could use this one. So we did get to the top, and now we're 14,000 feet. Right there. And we can look off toward this is the Fair Basin right through here, and the next piece of bridge. Get some good views, and the clouds are getting worse. They're getting more and more. However, we're getting high enough to maybe above. We set off from Camp 7 out in the Fair Basin, and snow, little snow drizzle, about 6 inches snow, and put Camp 8 out in the middle there. Then moved on up the main ridge, has some aluminum snow shovels, so we can't use. We're well above the clouds, the like we have the weather. And this is Camp 9. That's about 17,500 feet. And there's the route onto the top. Right here. Well, we begin. Now it's cold. Below 14,000 degrees, 15,000 feet, we can sort of put up with whatever weather lies. It's just sort of dirt. But above 14,000 feet, the mountain is king. And it's very cold. It can get extremely windy. To the point where the only shelter you can live in is a snow cave. It's strong. So we plan, even though the weather is very fine, we know we're going to be warm while we're walking. So the thing to do is time this so we arrive at the top. Somehow, sun comes up, we enjoy it, it's warm. That's the plan. But we arrive an hour too soon. We have to be slower. And while we wait, one of us gets a little bit on the cold side. The sun finally does begin to come up. So, in fact, this person decides that, it's 4. Well, the other 6 are not all enthusiastic. So we dug a shallow grave, and you can unroll up there, there's no glasses, put down some rope insulation, we put 2 people who were quite warm, and first, and then next, and then a couple more weeks later. Kept them warm until the sun finally really got high enough. And here's everybody on top, except of course the Carter. This is the day before. So someone has to stand away. But it was the best summit day in the last complete night. And when the sun finally got behind us, here's now Huntington, a little over 12,000 feet through the clouds. There's now Hunter over here at 14 and something. And then here's the shadow of the twin peaks of Denali, slowly moving toward us. And of course, we can go very, very close to the right there, the shadows. Back to Camp 9. Yeah, everything looks fine. Clouds down below, Tuesday. In fact, it clears enough we can see that there's going to be a real problem. This is the Root Glacier now. Days and days later. So it's been 4 weeks. And we haven't been on the glacier for 2.5 months. So we don't know whether we can get to it or not. Let me start that. We'll find out soon. Right away, we get into the cloud, then arrive at Camp 6, where we left a couple boxes of food, a couple days of food ourselves, in the blizzard. Now, there has been a lot of snow since we left. We took along 3-foot willow lines, always marked on the glacier, so you can always travel through it in cloud, and the whiteout if necessary. In high on the mountain also have willow ones spaced 1 mile length apart. So the second person on the rope stays along while the first one wanders and then looks for the next one. And you don't move until that one's final. Well, some enterprising person, when we left this camp, in a small cosh in it, and taped 2 of these together. So probably a foot overlap. So we had 5 foot overlap. Or we're only about 2 or 3 inches sticking out. This was a real accumulation. So we had to do lots of digging, but at least we knew where it was. It's very hard. We hadn't had that for digging for quite a while. We're all quite tired at this point, so we spend the whole 24 hours here. It takes a week to get that. And after that, that's 2 days to be done. Below that, now, there was out, there's a fixed rope place along here. And at this last part, at least, we walked in a small bracket line that separated a piece of cornerstone side from the steep ridge or slope line. On that side, that's all you need. But the picket, the last picket, was put in the cornice. And on the way down, that's over at this spot, I noticed when I got to that place that the fracture had widened 6 inches or so to about 15 weight. Well, it wasn't much more flat way of walking. And clipped into the fixed rope put my ice axe into the harness, and I was immediately reminded of Boyd Everett's comment on the southeast spur that I just saw. Well, it went down, it took the ticket, and I was a rocket screenshot. So everybody, and then the climbing rope never came tight. So everybody's very public. These people here are up there, a couple of packs, are coming to see what's going on. We actually, on the descent, since there's so much repair without necessarily the same party ahead to work on this, and the others would catch up. The trail was made, and then we would just roll over. Party to take the lead and so on as we go down. So we hadn't caught up yet. I woke up, I heard this clanging, and actually I was caught by the fixed rope and snarl. I fixed on stuck in the pyramid, and there was still 3 or 4 feet. So the climbing rope was tight. Ultimately, they power line. But this is the sump right there that's going out, which this is about 60 feet long and 20 feet wide. And the big disappointment that I had was that I never heard the crash. I was told that it was tremendous. 6,000 feet down. Wanted for the Matterhorn travelers in terrible shape. In fact, some of the pickets were melted out, turned over, were pointed in the way, and then all covered up with snow. Now, some places we couldn't even find them in the trench. So the ice axes were approximately to find them. We didn't find them all. Another glacier. Boyd had said we'd flown over, and he said, look, if you go down there later in the season, go to the middle, and then just walk down the middle. So he was right. I had developed a water tube. There were 2 crevasses that went all the way across. But at one, there was a big flake of snow, looked like with the history of the and it was about 4 or 5 feet wide around well, one was, and then another one had a nice floor. 20 down, 20 feet or so. So, and then done. Arrive at base camp. Right, this is the low frequency gradient. We carried a high frequency gradient in order to call off flight checks. We had organized the pilot that after 2 weeks, some amount of time, if we hadn't heard anything, come look. And we had actually a tourist plane, this plane, come up and we were on Catacomb Ridge, approaching the East Ridge, flying tourists around looking at these crazy people, going up the ridge. So maybe we had a flight check with a spring. But we carried this high frequency radio. Bob was here with us tonight, was the battery pack carriers, battery radio. Let them get too cold. But at base camp, you have to have a low frequency. It goes over the surrounding temperature. All the way there. Chris says, well, you fellas are going to have to wait. This is July 20, 1960. And the first landing of people on the moon. Not only that, every television show in Alaska up until that day had been made available on tape. Fly the tapes to Alaska, play them in Anchorage and Fairbanks, and broadcast. This was the first live broadcast. I watched But they were delighted. So everybody was in town glued to their televisions. We saw each other. All come sometime. So we celebrated. And while we celebrated, although there's another problem too, it's suggested. There have been forest fires that summer, so there's a lot of ash in the air. And the ash, when it gets on the snow, accelerates the melting. So we had sun cups, this basement, that were 6 feet across and a foot and a half deep. Suggested we flatten or take the crests off the sun cups. And then mark her out with some dark bits of whatever we got on the table. So we didn't know where it is. And we did the best art we could, but pretty hard stuff. So when the flood cliff comes, not McKinley or Denali has decided to give us another problem. Clouds roll in, and we have to be, air pressure has to be going through this tunnel. 200 feet between the snow and the cloud with walls of rock going up. Fortunately, it never narrowed. So we finally arrived. And as we leave Alaska and the mountains, well, before we went, we'd been told that the route we had chosen would present relentless difficulties. By now, we were well convinced of it. We had marble hard ice, glass problems, cornices, some even the wooden space up in the mountain. Friable ice and anchors that melted out and became snowed over. But all of this seemed to bring out the best of people. And I think, from my point of view, the most rewarding thing was the way everyone responded to these challenges. The last piece of fixed rope was placed with as much care as the first piece, and we had 2 miles of it. And we all got to the top together. So as we leave Alaska, and the mountains, we do so with happy memories, feeling satisfaction, and desire to go back.
So, Robert, if anyone has a question, we have a better memory than that.
This brought back a lot of memories.
Did you ever see this?
Yes.
I know. Another thing is that none of those pictures are mine. My camera broke at base camp. Those were the days of shutters. The shutter jammed. So they're all photographs of other people on the expedition. And that's one of the better photographs. Excuse me?
You mean you didn't have a GoPro?
Incredible shots.
Oh, those were beautiful. Inspiring.
Thank you.
So what would you have to say to someone who wanted to repeat your ascent?
If it hasn't been done since,
Yeah.
I'd say pick another route. What would you say?
Well, it depends on what your objective is. And our objective was just to have a good time. And we had no idea whether we'd get up or not. In fact, if the weather had been like it was the previous year when some friends of mine went up on another new way, they had, I think, 2 camps below the top, a 2-week storm. They were underneath an overhang, avalanches just rolled down. You know, they were safe, but the stuff kept going by. So you have to wait till it kind of quits coming down and then go on up. They did. They got to the top. They got to base camp, another week and a half. They were 3 extra weeks on the mountain that they attempted. But you can survive. We take 6,000 calories a day per person because of the temperature and energy and all. So if you're in the tent, you can survive with half. Stretch out the time, and that's what they did. Of course, they had base camp for the extra time. They had food they didn't have to carry. But that's the problem. You don't know how long you're going to be there. And a lot of people just aren't very interested in, I have to be back at a certain time, meetings with this, that, and the other.
Put world on hold for life.
Not everybody.
Come on up here, Bob, so you
I'm sorry.
I didn't hear that. Everyone had been to 14,000 feet at least. And my own experience anyway is that if people are going to have considerable trouble with altitude, it'll occur at 12 to 12,500 feet. I do know a couple people who just never get above that elevation. So we wanted to be sure that everyone who went on the trip had at least been that high. Didn't have to be as high as Alaskan peak, but at least ought to be able to go to 14.
I actually got sick at our Camp 9, our 17,000 foot camp, and it was nice to have Dr. Benner along because he gave me some magic tablets that took care of everything. It was an intestinal gastric thing.
Will you all share level of experience?
No. There was difference in experience. A couple of us had been up Alaskan peaks before. At least one on the trip I can think of, I believe, had been to 14,000 feet, done a lot of outdoor things, and we knew the main thing is how are people going to respond. So Ken Jones, one of the 3, in fact, he's the one who cooked it up in the first place, living in Seattle, went on trips with people from the Mazamas and Portland and the Seattle Mountaineers, trying to see who might be interested and able to withstand what would turn up. And he was pretty good at his choice. Choices.
How long between conception of idea and day 1 on the trail was there for you guys?
Oh. Well, we didn't do anything to get ready for this until January, so it's the months of January through May. June 14th was when we were flown in.
Well, that's from when the idea was first hatched, though?
We didn't do anything. It wasn't until Ken turned up with this list in December. It says,
Okay.
I've done a little more work here. Can I talk to you into doing this? Okay. But now we got to pick an objective. And so we did have a Christmas time of 68. And then we started in, and that whole spring was spent working out how much stuff we would need.
Yeah.
So then it's a guess.
Okay.
And we came out 2.5 world short.
Pretty close guess.
Where I didn't hear. Oh, hopeless. We didn't have time. This well, the weather was too good, because we would not have made it if we had gotten to the summit. If we'd had weather like Boyd Everett party the year before. We just would not have done it because we didn't have the time, we didn't have the resources. So everybody was busy, and in a moment, Dawn. Oh, what was the question?
I meant,
Was there a point on the journey up where it seemed hopeless? And it's interesting you mentioned that. For the first day, the days on the glacier, the youngest people always worry that they're going to have enough to do. There's got 7 people. It doesn't look like that much. So, am I going to be relegated to carrying loads? And I'm going to do this leading. We had to just, every group that led, got pushed, would come back and send up the next group. We just cycled people around. The weather was good enough. We had hardly any storm time. So by the time we got to the East Ridge, and we're moving along that portion where the cornices are, there wasn't anybody worried about this. We got things to do. So I think the time you start feeling hopeless is when a week and a half, 2 weeks go by and you can't move because the avalanches are nearby, or storms and weather's holding you in. Oh, here.
Cool the ball.
But, so this is good about 2 miles of fixed line.
Yes.
What percentage of your weight do you think that was? All that you were figuring out.
Oh, well, it was quarter inch. And actually, so the question, Don, was how much percentage or what proportion of our baggage was the fixed rope. That quarter inch line, and the fact that it was gold line, I think probably saved our cables. In 2 falls, 100-foot fall on the deep foot on the fixed rope. And then the one I had was also on this one. In fact, that rope stretches 50% before it breaks. So the peak force is not near as high as it is the skipper rope. Now it's a more exciting ride. At least things don't come apart. So it's a small line, doesn't weigh all that much. That is intended for strategy.
A footnote, Joe. We didn't have time to cut all the fixed rope into shorter segments, and so some of it went up on the original spools, and that was a big part of the load. And then after the rope was emptied off, there were nice seats.
Were there anybody else climbing from any other direction from you out there?
Was there anyone else climbing from other directions? The answer is no. Well, that's not quite true. Clear around on the west side, the Hilton Glacier side. Certainly there were parties there. That's the standard or easiest way up, and the way most people go. It doesn't take too long. You're limited only, well, it could be weather, but usually it's your altitude adaptation that forms the limit.
You didn't see anybody.
Oh, yes, we did. At Camp 9, there was a party that came up from the other side. They were on top.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were standing up. Hey, well, somebody's got up. But we didn't really ever get to shake their hands. They were gone by the time we got them.
If there was one piece of modern gear that you could have had, then what would you trade?
If there was,
One piece of.
yes, I know, I'm trying to think. If there was,
I'm sorry.
I'm helping Donna. If there was, what piece of modern equipment might we
One piece.
wish we had?
If you only had one Right.
Can you think of anything?
No, I can't.
We used everything we had.
What about the clothing, as far as compared to the way you were so much down and down?
We had the best down sleeping bags. I've not been able, I don't even know where you can buy sleeping bags like that anymore. They work very nicely to well below 0. And the down jackets, you saw those in the summit picture, those puffy coats. We needed them. Yes, the only time anyone got cold was on the summit day, and it was Jim's feet. And all of us had cool feet that day, but he was complaining. I'm sure I did because I had a thermometer, but I have not looked it up.
Camp 9 was about -10 Fahrenheit.
Sounds right.
And I thought of one piece of modern gear. I broke the handle on my ice axe. It was an old wooden ice axe. You saw many of them in the photos, so it would have been nice to have a better ice axe.
Well, and you used the spare. You lost
That's right.
it and then found it.
I dropped my ice axe on rock number 3 on the way down. Anyway, ice axe. And in those days, people used really long ice axes. And now you see a much shorter style of ice axes. But we had long ice axes, and I think they were all wooden handled.
I might have had a fiberglass one.
Okay.
I don't remember. I do now. But the long handles actually are something you need for a good boot axe belay. So you might have ice that you can't get it in which case you ought to use a picket. But if you can't put the ice axe all the way in, it's not at all clear, because I've tried this. When I take new people on the snow, I say set an ice axe belay and I run downhill as hard as I can go. And you'd just be surprised what flies apart back there. Ice axes come out. What happened? I have to do a self-arrest. So you've got to really put them in well. Only on the glacier. Snowshoes, we did not use. Well, none of us were skiers. And then above the glacier, we didn't have any snowshoes at all. Well, you saw why, it was too steep.
What about all your garbage and things that you missed? Did that all come down?
No, it doesn't. So probably still there. That was the custom. That was the custom. I don't know what they're doing now. Sure, the population side, they have but on the other side, on the southeast spur, east ridge, the other side of the 69. 69. So, 3 years, are you going to do 50 years? Probably not. Get them 2 weeks. But thank you for the thought. I was going to say, don't call me.
I wonder if somebody would ask that. Exclusive of travel to Anchorage, just under $400 a piece.
Oh.
That included the bush pilot fee, included a motel for, I think, at least one night. I forgot how many nights we spent in Anchorage because we arrived and staged out over several days. A motel, a rental car, train fare, all this stuff. And the food, all the equipment, just under $400.
we bought a lot of the food in Anchorage, and the tape slip. It was at the grocery store, you know, they used to come out on paper. It went from about me to the end of the aisle over there.
They're interested in getting to the top quickly. It's the same thing that goes on with Everest. Everybody just goes up the one way. The idea is to get to the top. We actually just wanted to, every peak I'd been on in Alaska, we'd always done some variation or other. I didn't lead those trips, but that's where I sort of got the idea that it would be fun to do something a little different.
I've had another thought that I'll never know the answer to, but there were a number of places. If the geography had been a little bit different, we could not have made it. And I wonder what the geography looks like now. It might not be doable at this point.
What about more rock skills? Could that help? Maybe you said you bypassed a couple of rock features. Just one? If it is melted out a little more so these days, the rock climbing skills help.
You didn't see a whole lot of rocks sticking out.
Maybe there's more there.
You're young enough to find out.
We will see. I like the desert.
Well, oh, yes.
How do you take several trips? You have to take several trips between each camp to get all of your Europe.
Yes, the question had to do with how many carries we had. So on the glacier, we started with 4 carries. And the idea was, I think the first night, all we did was just take gear up and all come back and stay at base camp. But the second night, we took the tent of 3, that is, they carried their camp. And with the idea of staying there, and the next day, they're going to go on and put in the route while the rest of us go back down, excuse me, and carry another set of loads up. So we have the tent separated and we just keep rolling over. And there were several times where we had both tents ahead of some of the material. And so we'd go back down and get that from the lower tent and bring it up. So it had to do with just putting people where the effort was required. If we didn't know where we were going, get somebody up there and find out. We know what we're doing down here, carrying loads around. So the number of loads we had to carry between camps slowly went down as we went uphill. And it was a single carry from camp 7, I think, out to 8, and then 8 up to 9. They were heavy loads, but it was level, moderately level country, so at least to 8.
What was the age range of the people?
Well, I was 31 at the time. Gus, same age. Can't speak for you.
I've always been 7 years younger than you. Still am.
Funny how that came. Well, let's see. Pete, Neil, Jim, they were all grad students, so they were younger than. I think the oldest probably was Gus and I. Gus and I. I think he might be a few months older than I am, but not much. So 31 and down to somewhere between 20 and 25. Oh, yes.
When you came to the area of performance,
Well, there was, the one group came back. They had just gone up this vertical ice step, and they hadn't seen a way. So, but they also hadn't walked all the way onto it or started to chop their, shovel their way through it.
My question was, how did you
Well, you send out somebody who doesn't know any better. They haven't seen it. So it actually was, you're looking at the group that did it. So
And we ditched the steel shovel at the end of the cornices.
I think we might have carried it down partway. Yeah. Yes.
Do you know if anyone has gone up the route, the first 2 or 3 ridge lines that went this rock fall that you guys bypassed or you guys walked past? You know,
Oh.
gone up that way still?
Well, no, I think the better way on the ridge is to go around Mount Danview.
So
I'd
going
have to
up that
show you
ridge
the
around
picture.
to the right?
Yes. So as we were looking at this from below, we came off this direction and up the Ridge Glacier. If you just go around this thing, there's a big hill there called Mount Danview. And I think it's easier to go up that, but it puts you way out the ridge. But it still ended easier to have done that instead of coming up the way. People who walk around Mount McKinley, because there are people who ski around even in the winter. That's, 1,200 miles around, something like that. They go over the East Ridge at that location in the back there. But the real issue is whether there are ice falls around behind them. I don't think, I've never flown over it. I just looked at Brad Washburn's map. And it doesn't look like there would be much back there.
Have you guys climbed any other mountains in Alaska?
St. Elias, Logan, King Peak.
5 years later, we did Mount Fort.
Which is next to.
So the second highest peak in the Alaska.
Well, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.